Hello and welcome to LinkedIn Conversations. My name's Ken Turbitt, and the purpose of this video is just to catch up with people that I used to be connected with on LinkedIn, either as employees or as people I met in various conferences around the world. And today I'm delighted I've got David D'Agostino. Dago for short, I've known for, I reckon, 20 years when we hooked up at
Has to
Peregrine.
be. Well, in fact, I think it was even before Peregrine when you were at Fujitsu, wasn't
ICL,
it?
yeah, Fujitsu ICL, yeah.
ICL, sorry, yeah, gosh.
Gosh, that's going
Those
back
are the
to the
days.
late 90s. We're going to be old in a minute if you say that.
Has to be. God, yeah, it's a terrifying thought.
It is
Yeah,
a terrifying
but
thought.
you're absolutely right. We go back a long way. In
Yeah. And you were
fact,
my boss in
I had
those days. You had to lick me into
well, a
shape.
boss in inverted commas, I think. Yeah, in fact, in fact, what was his name? The
Guy
Belgian guy.
Toff. Guy Toff?
Guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Guy came to work with us at
Yeah.
ServiceNow a few years ago. He's still there, doing very well.
I must reach out to him
Bump into
then.
Valerie Chazalon once in a
Yes.
while.
Or Valerie
She's
Oosterhoff, who was quite a handful.
yes, gosh, I remember Valerie. I think she's at Fujitsu now, isn't she?
Yeah. There's going to be names from the past
Valerie,
coming out.
it is. It's going to be, yeah. No, never mind talking about value propositions. This is just going to be a giant.
Just to swap names and what everyone's doing, really. So how have you been coping with wonderful
Yeah.
COVID year of 2020?
It's interesting. I mean, work-wise, it's been productive for the company, and it's been really busy. I mean, the one strange thing, and I think we sort of touched on this when we were talking a bit earlier on, is just the lack of travel and the lack of movement does tend to drive you a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
So kind of staring at the same four walls does have an impact, I think. But to be honest, I mean, compared to the problems that other people have been struggling with, it's been pretty much business as usual from my point of view.
And how have you coped with wife and family at home?
And,
how have you coped with wife and kids at home?
well, we've all got our own. I've got my study here, so I can shut myself away. So when things get too intense, I can pretend I'm commuting to work, and the boys are both away at school or uni. So I mean, they're home now, but
Right.
so
no self-schooling for you then?
Well, I've been trying to do some reading, but mostly junk fiction, and obviously now I'm going to be revisiting John le Carre since that sort of horrible news this morning. So
yeah. I was surprised to hear on the news actually with that on Night Manager, which he wrote. He did a cameo appearance on the BBC adaptation of that, which is quite fun to watch.
Oh, did he really?
I didn't know. Yeah, the big argument on the dinner tables was John le Carre was in there. It's quite funny to watch. So, yeah,
a bit like Alfred Hitchcock making a little appearance in his movies.
Yeah. Why not? If you can get away with it, preserve yourself. So, where is it you're working now?
I'm with a company called NextThink now, not to be confused with Netflix.
Yeah.
So it's actually a Swiss company. So it's the first time I've worked for a non-US company for, gosh, long time. Yeah, and it's although they've got quite a big presence now in the US, and they're growing more and more, and it's quite interesting because as well as the shift in kind of working culture to something a bit more Eurocentric, although I'm still hovering around the world of IT service management, it's from a completely different point of view, and I'm sure you'll sort of recognize from the days when we were all steeped in ITIL and all of those things. The IT service management industry tends to be, or it can tend to kind of be a bit inward looking, where the SLAs and the measurements and the whole management philosophy is all about keeping the infrastructure running, keeping it up, and so on, making sure that the servers are up, and so much of the perception of IT is almost kind of tainted, because people who are using IT tend to have a very different impression of the quality of the service they're getting
as opposed to the business,
compared to what IT think they're delivering.
Yeah.
So, IT guys are sweating blood, and the guys in the business are saying, well, actually, you're not giving me what I was expecting or what I was paying for. So,
yeah.
next thing is a bit of a shift around, where we're not. It's not an ITSM company. It's more of an end user experience management organization.
Oh, okay.
So essentially, we're able to manage things from the device inwards to the service rather than kind of looking outwards from the center, which means that we can capture information that was just not visible or really difficult to get hold of before.
Right.
And that's not just keeping track of what's going on the device, but also keeping track of how is that device communicating with the various services that it's connecting to. But in addition, there's an ability to do almost kind of CSAT or surveys on steroids. So
Right.
we can collect information directly from the end user about what he's thinking and feeling,
Yeah.
And then correlate that with what we can see about the performance of his
particular service,
his connection and his device and so on.
Okay.
Which means that we're giving you a completely. Have you heard of XLAs, experience
Yes.
level agreements?
Yes.
It's a bit of a buzzword, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, originally, I think the word was invented by a Dutch organisation, but there's lots of organisations now are starting to adopt that, and it's trying to take a slightly different approach to SLAs, which are about answering the phone in 3 rings and making sure the data center's 99.9% available, and actually putting metrics in place that are geared more towards the end user's experience of the service that he's getting.
Yeah.
And so, we're working with a number of people out there. So people like, I don't know if you know Alan Nance.
Yes, I do.
Kind of around.
Yeah.
Around in the
he was a real ITIL person
for a long time. So absolutely, yeah. So we've been working quite closely with his new organisation, XLA Collab or Citrus Collab.
Right.
And they've really got into the, if you like, the art and science of how to define not only the metrics, but also how to build an organisation that can take advantage of them and so on. So that's one part of what we're doing. The other part, I mean, I'm here at NextThink as the ITSM kind of practice lead. So essentially, I'm spending almost as much time in the ITSM tooling as I was when I was at ServiceNow.
I was going to say, you can't escape, can you?
It's got as much gravity as Jupiter. Yeah.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you think about the world that we were working in, your speciality, if I can remember it, even from ICL days, was the whole IT asset management side of things.
Yeah.
And being able to capture not only static data about, what software have you got installed and how much RAM, but how are those things actually behaving and performing, and are they staying compliant? I mean, all of that data is traditionally really difficult to get into a CMDB using traditional kind of IT focused
tools,
discovery tools and so on. I remember that you did a project, didn't you, when you were with us at Peregrine, where you went into, it was a bank, I think, and you were doing a bit of an investigation around their configuration management and their CMDB and their asset management. And didn't you found that there was something like 36 separate initiatives going on?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
none of them knew about what the other was doing.
Exactly. Very common. But what you're talking about there reminds me, when I left, I went on to, you remember Remedy and then BMC. And BMC brought out the business service management. So a lot of it sounds similar to that, where it was connecting the business services from the business entities, and how you automate those, and how you should look at, again, the experience that the end user is finding from running his part of the business, and how IT is supporting that. So it sounds like we're, as always, these things go in huge cycles. So it sounds like we're coming back to a BSM type of scenario again, from a different wording.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, we're just about to release a new app. Kind of originally it was called Business Service Management. Now it's kind of been more renamed to kind of application performance management. But it's, I think, you know, historically the stumbling block was always, how do we get
Yes.
The right amount and the right quality of data coming in, and then looking at what you can do with that, exactly to your point about business service management. It's not just about saying, well, I'm getting all this experience data so we can fix incidents more quickly. It's really about, I'm getting all of this really good quality data, so how can we feed that, for example, into the demand management piece, or how can we feed it into our portfolio management in order to make more accurate and sensible and cost-effective decisions about what to spend now in order to improve our next year.
Yeah,
and that has always been a real challenge, because you know, you're relying on surveys that never get filled in, conversations that can be misinterpreted, and data that's, you know, 6 months behind the point where you need it. So it's interesting.
I think now analytics has become much more visible, where people realize they can now do, you know, big data mining to find out much more value information for leading companies forward a bit, rather than before. I think there was a lot of marketing was ahead of the curve of what was achievable.
Things are beginning to take shape. I mean, again, I mean, an old colleague of mine at ServiceNow, a guy called Paul Hardy, who's the kind of the chief kind of innovation officer for EMEA there, talks about the kind of sequence of modes, if you like, going from reactive. It's a little bit, again, I mean, reinventing the wheel. It's a little bit like, you know, the old maturity curves that we used to talk about in the Peregrine days, even, where, you know, you start from reactive mode or chaos mode, and then you start being able to put processes and data in place to become more proactive. But I think we're beginning to get to the point now where we can even start to kind of toy with the idea of being predictive. So we can capture data now where, whether it's machine intelligence or whether it's good quality analytics, we can start to spot things now that we can take action on and stop stuff from happening, stop bad stuff from happening anyway, and try and keep the good stuff from going on. And it's, you know, it's interesting as well how once you can start doing that, once you've got the information to help, IT's PR improves as well, you know, because, you know, so often traditionally you'd produce your monthly service report and it would all be, you know, red mark, this didn't work, this should have worked, this cost more than it should have done, etc. If you can get to a situation where you can start saying, well, here's a list of the things that didn't happen, which is why you got a better level of service than we were expecting. And if you can start delivering good news instead of bad news, then it can really fundamentally change the relationship between
business and IT. And start talking in business language to them as well, so that it's not the modem talk that we tended to do before.
No, exactly. I used to use I don't know if you remember, one of my slides used to be this old who was it, Bruegel or someone, a painting of a 16th century businessman. All of his finery. I still use that picture because it's still relevant, you know.
You used to use the scream, I remember, as well.
The scream, that was the scream with the trumpet of doom, if you remember the trumpet of doom.
Yes, I do. Now we're going down reminiscing mode here. So just moving it forward a little bit, what do you see as the challenges in the next 6 months, apart from us all dying of COVID?
Well, the challenge is going to be, you know, all of us surviving COVID, I guess, because, you know, we're going to have to, you hear people talking about the new normal a lot, and I think that's a little bit of a misrepresentation of what's happened, because I think there's just been so much change. I think what has been really interesting is how well businesses adapted to the whole
and
COVID situation. I mean, you hear some horror stories. I mean, talking again with some old colleagues about you know, both public sector and private sector organizations that suddenly on 2 weeks notice, you know, they had to move 10,000 people to go and work from you know, the edge of their bed or whatever. And just being able to deal with that has meant an awful lot of fire drills. So you've got situations where organizations spent a lot of money, bought thousands of laptops, you know, whatever, sent people out of the door without necessarily being able to go through the kind of the more proactive steps of recording and, you know, figuring out what was installed on it and how much was being spent and where they were going. So there's a, you know, it kind of jokingly talk about the post-panic audit, you know, once things start to get back to normal, how do you start to account for all of that and keep track of it?
Yeah, exactly.
And plus, people aren't just all going to go back and work from the office again. I mean, I think one thing that COVID's done that I guess could be seen as something a bit positive is that it's broken that sort of decades-old logjam of people, of presenteeism, I guess you can call it, where people were expected to work from the office just so that they could be seen to be working from the office.
Yeah.
When now, you know, in all sorts of use cases, we've proven that working from home, you know, with good internet connections and good technology and, you know, things like Zoom and Teams and so on, it's viable. And so many organizations I've spoken to are talking about that being, if not a permanent shift to what it is at the moment, at least something a lot more fluid, and having much more openness to people working from home more often.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that does raise there lots of other challenges, because as always, there's an impact of anything that occurs. You know, what happens to the office blocks that are going to be empty, and the support around those, the coffee shops, the restaurants, etc., that support those offices which are now empty. So there's all that.
We were talking about rental income a short while ago, weren't we? And
Wonder
why. I think there's going to be a big impact there.
There definitely is.
And I guess the other questions are around. I mean, okay. I mean, and to be honest, NextThink have done okay through the lockdown, because we're in a really good position to help organizations to actually see what's going on from, you know, the edge of the guy's bed while he's trying to connect to a dodgy Wi-Fi with a dog running around his feet. You know, we can, you know, proactively alert you if we see signal problems, or if we see that you haven't got the VPN installed correctly, and so on. So from the point of view of connectivity and having your apps working okay is fine, but then there are questions of you know, how do you ensure that people continue to be good corporate citizens, you know, in the broadest possible way. You know, you know, not that people are necessarily deliberately going out of their way, but it's just, it may be easier to be less protected from all the stuff that's happening out there on the internet if you're you know, if you're sitting at home in the margins.
No, I agree. And all the, you know, as we were talking also before, that we're human, that people that like connecting with other people and get energy from each other, and, you know, we're sociable animals. So how do you do that when everyone's working from the home? There has to be, you know, some sort of movement between, to get people together to create, you know, ideas and just energy and teamwork and part of that corporate identity as well. There's all of those little elements that have to be thought of as well before you just go down 100% of remote working route.
No, I completely agree, and that's something. If anything, it's the social aspect that most people I'm talking to are missing most of all. And it's one thing to you know, have a Zoom call on Thursday evenings and have a glass of something, but it's not the same as actually being with people in a meeting room or in a.
Well, going back to when we worked together, I remember, you know, meeting in the little coffee area, bumping into somebody else, and conversation would lead to, let's meet in an office and discuss this through. You know, all those little ideas would just come because you were interacting with someone.
You can spark off each other. Absolutely. So there needs to be a solution to that. Hopefully, once the vaccine's here, then people will work from home and just travel in for a weekly
meeting or something. Great. Okay, well, great to catch up. We should do more of these, I think, whether it's, you know, to more of your colleagues or to you again. I'm quite happy either of those, but I've certainly found it interesting to find out, you know, what your company now does. I like the idea that there's a think on there at the end of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Which is pretty good. And so I think we'll just wind it up at this point. If anyone wants to subscribe and see any more of these recordings, then please feel free to do so. And Dago, thank you very much for your time.
Likewise, Ken. Great catching up. I'll definitely keep an eye out on Ken's video
YouTube.
factory as you start churning more of these out. Yeah. And, let's hope you go viral, and you can start doing unboxings and
exactly
video games.
I just don't want you spending too much time cleaning the windows behind you, because there's an awful lot of them, that's all.
These, oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it's nanobots is the way ahead with things like that. I mean, if they were real windows, I'd be worried, I have to say.
Anyway, great catching up. Cheers.
Likewise, great speaking with you, Ken. Cheers.
Bye.